There is a circle not marked by walls or borders. It exists as a consequence of tilt and orbit, drawn by the way the Earth leans toward the sun. This is the Arctic, one of the last vast and untouched regions on our planet, a land of raw beauty at every turn. At approximately 66 degrees and 33 minutes north, light itself begins to behave differently. Days stretch beyond 24 hours. Nights disappear entirely or return for months at a time. Here, time feels altered. Seasons compress and expand. Survival depends less on speed and more on patience. In this journey, we are going to explore a few of the most extraordinary wonders hidden beyond 66th parallel. The Arctic represents far more than a geographical location. It is a living, breathing ecosystem. Spread across multiple nations and cultures, the Arctic region encompasses Greenland, northern Norway, northernmost Sweden, northern Finland, the remote Russian Arctic, northern Iceland, the Canadian High Arctic, and Alaska along with the Arctic Ocean and adjacent seas. This region calls the Arctic Circle. Our journey begins deep in the Arctic, where human presence is minimal, and adaptation is no longer subtle, but essential. The Arctic is often imagined as distant, but distance is relative. To understand this region, we begin not at its edge, but near its center, far north of the mainland, beyond familiar coastlines and shipping routes, lies a place where the Arctic sets the rules. This is Svalbard. At around 78 degrees north, this archipelago belongs to the high Arctic, where seasons behave in extremes and survival is never taken for granted. For nearly 4 months each year, the sun never rises above the horizon. Then in summer, it refuses to set at all. This dramatic cycle reshapes daily life, blurring the line between day and night and forcing residents to create routines independent of sunlight. Temperatures regularly fall below minus 20 degrees Celsius in winter, and fierce winds can make conditions far harsher. Nobody is allowed to be buried in the ground because permafrost prevents bodies from decomposing. Glaciers cover more than half of the land, slowly carving valleys and calving icebergs into dark fjords. Human settlement here has always been conditional. Coal mining once drove the economy, and abandoned mining towns still stand as frozen reminders of earlier ambition. Today, scientific research dominates, with stations monitoring climate change, glaciers, and Arctic ecosystems. Wildlife in Svalbard survives at the absolute edge of habitability. The polar bear is the most iconic presence here. They roam freely across sea, ice, and tundra, and they outnumber humans. About 300 resident bears and thousands more roaming the ice. In Svalbard, polar bears are protected, and people are required to carry firearms outside settlements, not for hunting, but for safety. They are powerful swimmers, capable of covering vast distances between ice flows. Here, the greatest predator on Earth is entirely dependent on one fragile element: the sea ice. For millennia, this has been its hunting platform. Seals, rich in blubber and packed with calories, are the prize. They fuel the bear for the long, dark Arctic winter. But in this last decade, A silent, invisible force has rewritten the rules. Climate change has brought longer, brutal ice-free periods. The equation is simple and devastating. No ice, no seal. The bear's marine hunting grounds are dissolving beneath its feet. Now, the bears that remain on land are forced into a desperate gamble. They must look inward, towards terrestrial food sources they were never built to hunt. The target? The hardy, endemic Svalbard reindeer. These grazers offer an alternative. Reindeer in Svalbard are smaller and stockier than their mainland relatives. Isolated for thousands of years, they have adapted to conserve energy, grazing slowly on sparse vegetation during the short summer. Unlike many Arctic animals, they do not migrate, remaining in the same territory year-round. Polar bears are not the only predator ruling Svalbard. The Arctic fox thrives here, changing its coat from brown in summer to white in winter. Highly opportunistic, it feeds on bird eggs, small mammals, and leftovers from polar bear kills. Its survival depends on flexibility rather than strength. Bird life dominates the summer months. Millions of seabirds arrive to nest on cliffs and coastal plains. Species such as little auks, kittiwakes, and puffins transform silent rock faces into living colonies. Their arrival marks a brief explosion of life in the Arctic calendar. In surrounding waters, ringed seals, bearded seals, and walruses haul out on ice and shorelines. These marine mammals form the foundation of the food web, linking ocean productivity to land-based predators. Svalbard's wildlife is defined by balance and limitation. Every movement, every hunt, and every breeding season depends on ice, timing, and restraint. From wildlife survival, the focus shifts to doomsday survival with the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. The vault, carved into permafrost, stores millions of seeds from around the world, protecting global biodiversity against catastrophe. Svalbard is the Arctic stripped to its essentials. Remote, powerful, and uncompromising, it exists on nature's terms alone. From the high Arctic, we move south. Leaving Svalbard means leaving a world ruled almost entirely by ice, where survival is conditional and human presence is temporary. As the latitude falls, the Arctic begins to soften. See, ice thins. Darkness gives way to reflection. Mountains rise from water instead of snow. Ahead lies Tromsø, a city still Arctic, but firmly inhabited. This is a place where the sun disappears for weeks, and life continues anyway. Often called the Arctic capital, it hosts universities, concerts, and cafes year-round at nearly 70 degrees north. Despite its latitude, the city experiences relatively mild winters. This is due to the North Atlantic current, which carries warm water far north into the Arctic. Historically, cities serve as a launch point for polar expeditions. Explorers pass through its harbor on their way toward the North Pole. Today, the city continues to function as a gateway for Arctic. Fishing, research, and tourism define Tromsø today. During polar night, the sun remains below the horizon for nearly 2 months. Yet life does not stop. Schools remain open, boats continue to fish, and streets glow with artificial light. The daily routine continues. The Arctic here is not isolated. It is connected to the world. Leaving Tromsø behind, the city lights fade into open sea. Mountains rise closer to water, and the Arctic sheds its urban edge. Senja, often called Norway in miniature, because it contains nearly every Norwegian landscape on a single island. Its coastline is one of the most dramatic in the Arctic. Steep mountains rise directly from the ocean, their jagged edges carved by glaciers that retreated thousands of years ago. The island sits well above the Arctic Circle, exposed to rapidly changing weather rolling in from the Norwegian Sea. Despite its latitude, Senja's winters are moderated by the ocean. Winter temperatures often range between -5 and -10 degrees Celsius, but wind and storms define the experience more than cold itself. Clear skies can vanish within minutes, replaced by fog, rain, or snow. Movement depends on weather. Fishing boats red wind and swell before leaving harbor. Fishing villages cling to narrow strips of land between sea and mountain. Houses face the water, acknowledging where both danger and livelihood arrive. Cod fisheries continue to shape daily life, just as they have for generations. Roads wind carefully along cliffs and fjords, revealing sudden panoramic views. Here, the Arctic feels untamed and immediate. The coastline fractures further south, breaking into islands shaped by ice and time. The sea remains constant, but the land grows sharper. The Lofoten Islands bend the Arctic into improbable forms. Jagged granite peaks rise directly from sheltered fjords, while white beaches curve beneath snow-covered mountains. Lofoten lies far north of the Arctic Circle, yet its beaches can look almost tropical, minus the temperature. Though positioned far north, winter temperatures often remain close to 0 degrees Celsius. The Gulf Stream carries warm Atlantic water along the coast, preventing sea ice from forming. This rare combination has supported settlement for over 1,000 years. Fishing villages line the shore, built close to water and wind. Fishing defines the landscape. Every winter, millions of Arctic cod migrate here to spawn. Wooden racks dry fish in open air, preserving food through cold and wind rather than salt. A method unchanged for centuries. Viking remains have been found throughout the islands, linking Lofoten to early Arctic seafaring history. Light governs life in Lofoten. Winter days shrink into blue-tinted hours, while summer brings endless daylight under the midnight sun. Sleep patterns shift. Time stretches. Beauty here is inseparable from labor. The Arctic rewards effort, but never guarantees ease. Beyond Lofoten's peaks, the landscape relaxes. The Arctic opens wider and the ocean deepens. North of Lofoten, the Vesterålen Islands open into a broader Arctic landscape. Rolling hills replace sharp peaks, and the coastline stretches outward into wide bays. What makes Vesterålen unique lies beneath the water. Cold Arctic currents collide with warmer Atlantic water here, creating nutrient-rich seas. Plankton flourishes. Fish follow. Whales arrive close to shore. Sperm whales dive more than a kilometer into darkness, hunting giant squid far below the surface. Fishing remains central to life here, but whale watching has become an important addition to the local economy. Boats leave harbors in search of surfacing giants, blending conservation with livelihood. Weather still governs daily life. Wind, fog, and sudden storms shape movement and planning. In Vesterålen, the Arctic reveals its marine power. From open water, the Arctic narrows suddenly. The sea draws inward and stone closes around it. Here lies Trofjord. It is a stunning, narrow, 2 kilometers long fjord in Norway's Lofoten archipelago. Trofjord is so narrow that large ships must turn around inside it by carefully rotating in place. Fjord cuts sharply into mountains, a steep-walled passage barely 100 meters wide at its narrowest point. The cliffs rise almost vertically from the water, compressing light and sound. For centuries, it was a contested fishing ground, fought over by rival fleets competing for rich cod stocks. Now serves as a passage for boats and seabirds. See eagles circle above, nesting on ledges high in the rock. Their wings echo against the cliff walls as they pass. The fjord feels briefly enclosed, almost claustrophobic, before opening suddenly back to the open sea. It is a reminder that the Arctic can shift from vast to intimate in moments. Passing through the fjord, land begins to thin. Ahead, the continent ends. At North Cape, land ends abruptly. A sheer cliff rises more than 300 meters above the Barents Sea, fully exposed to Arctic wind and weather. Vegetation struggles to survive. Low mosses and hardy plants cling to thin soil, shaped by constant wind and cold. For centuries, sailors have passed this point, navigating Arctic waters long before roads or visitors arrived. Today, travelers gather beneath a metal globe marking the symbolic edge of Europe. Despite its fame, Nordkapp feels quiet. The ocean stretches endlessly. The horizon feels unfinished. Here, the Arctic does not announce itself loudly. It simply continues beyond sight. leaving the coast behind. The Arctic turns inward. Mountains give way to forests. Fjords become frozen rivers. The ocean's influence weakens. This is an Arctic shaped not by waves, but by land. In Swedish Lapland, the Arctic does not announce itself with cliffs or icebergs. It arrives quietly, through forests that thin, through ground that never fully thaws, and through cold that lingers. Ice gives way to forest, and industry returns to landscape. Kiruna lies above the Arctic Circle, near 67 degrees north, built atop one of the world's richest iron ore deposits. It is one of the few cities on Earth that is literally being moved because the ground beneath it is slowly collapsing. Beneath the city is one of the world's largest and richest iron ore deposits. For over a century, mining has shaped life here. The ground beneath the town is slowly collapsing as tunnels expand below. Entire neighborhoods are being relocated, building by building. Snow covers the ground for more than half the year, and temperatures can drop below minus 30 degrees Celsius. Yet this is not a remote outpost. It is a functioning Arctic city shaped by industry, science, and survival. Kiruna is surrounded by vast Arctic wilderness. Frozen lakes, boreal forests, and rolling tundra stretch far beyond the city limits. Reindeer often wander close to roads and railways. Sami reindeer herders still move across the region, navigating rail line, highways, and industrial zones layered over ancestral routes. Kiruna exposes a central Arctic tension. Resource wealth and fragile environments exist side by side, neither easily removed. In the small village of Jukkasjärvi, winter itself becomes architecture. Located about 200 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle, this settlement sits beside the Torna River, whose crystal clear ice is the foundation of one of the world's most unusual hotels. Each year, as temperatures drop below minus 10 degrees Celsius, blocks of ice are harvested from a frozen river. Artists from around the world arrive to transform this raw material into rooms, corridors, sculptures, and even furniture. Every spring, the ice hotel completely melts and disappears into the river, only to be rebuilt from scratch the following winter. No two ice hotels are ever the same. Every winter brings new designs, new themes, and new stories carved directly into ice. Inside, the temperature stays well below freezing. Guests sleep on ice beds covered with reindeer skins, wrapped in specialized thermal sleeping bags designed for Arctic conditions. Silence dominates the interior, broken only by footsteps and the faint crackle of ice shifting. The ice hotel is more than a novelty. It represents an Arctic philosophy of impermanence. When spring arrives and the sun climbs higher in the sky, the structure melts naturally and returns to the Torna River. Nothing is wasted. Everything cycles back into the environment. Architecture fades. The Arctic reclaims its open ground. In far northern Sweden, Abisko National Park sits at a dramatic crossroads between mountains, tundra, and open sky. It lies within a natural rain shadow created by surrounding peaks. This means that while storms may rage nearby, Abisko often remains clear, creating a perfect, unusually stable viewing conditions for the aurora borealis. It is considered one of the best places on Earth to see the northern lights. The park marks a visible shift in the Arctic landscape. Dense forests fade away, replaced by low shrubs, rocky ground, and wide open space. Winter temperatures commonly fall below -25 degrees Celsius, and snow can blanket the region for 8 months of the year. In summer, the midnight sun fuels a sudden explosion of plant life, insects, and migratory birds. Abisko has long served as a natural corridor through the mountains. For centuries, Sami people and traders traveled this route between the Scandinavian interior and the Norwegian coast. Today, modern rail lines follow similar paths, tracing ancient movements across the Arctic. Wildlife thrives in quiet balance here. The landscape feels exposed and honest. Wind shapes the land. Silence stretches across frozen lakes. There's little shelter, and that is precisely the point. Leaving Abisko behind, the mountains soften and the land begins to open. Rock gives way to forest, and elevation slowly disappears. As borders fade, the Arctic changes character. The dramatic peaks of Sweden settle into Finland's endless trees. Here, the Arctic does not announce itself with cliffs or glaciers. It arrives quietly, marked by light, silence, and patience. Ahead lies Rovaniemi, where an invisible line crosses a forest, and the Arctic truly begins. The Arctic announces itself quietly near Rovaniemi in northern Finland. It is the official home of Santa Claus, with a simple sign marks the Arctic Circle, cutting across forest and road at 66.5 degrees north. Cars slow briefly, cameras come out, then people move on. Rovaniemi sits just south of true wilderness, rebuilt almost entirely after the Second World War. It is a modern city shaped by cold. Winter temperatures regularly fall below -20 degrees Celsius. Snow is not an event here. It is infrastructure. Rivers freeze into temporary roads. Sound carries farther and dense. Cold air. Buildings are designed to hold heat. And people learn early how to dress, how to wait, how to endure. Located right on the Arctic Circle line near Rovaniemi, there's a village you could meet Santa Claus in person. The Santa Claus Village exists at a unique intersection of myth and geography. Here, an invisible line drawn by Earth still becomes something people can see, touch, and photograph. Marked clearly across the ground, the Arctic Circle runs straight to the village, placing among the northernmost regularly visited destinations in the world. Buildings are designed for warmth and efficiency. Reindeer are present not as symbols, but as working animals tied to Sami traditions. Reindeer wander close to the outskirts of town. Sami culture remains present, though often quietly, woven into language, craft, and seasonal rhythms. Long nights are illuminated by artificial light, and daily life continues regardless of season. Beyond the city, Finnish Lapland opens into vast forest and wetlands shaped by retreating ice thousands of years ago. Pine and birch dominate the landscape, adapted to nutrient-poor soils and long, punishing winters. Snow can cover the ground for more than half the year. In January, Temperatures often drop below -30 degrees Celsius. In summer, mosquitoes arrive in dense clouds, another reminder that life here follows its own rules. For the Sami people, this land is not empty. It is detailed and specific, mapped by reindeer migration routes, calving grounds, and seasonal camps. Knowledge here is inherited through movement rather than monuments. Within this vast region, national parks protect some of its most distinct expressions. Puhaluasta National Park feels ancient and enclosed. Its forested ridges rise sharply from the surrounding land, forming natural corridors shaped by melting ice at the end of the last ice age. Deep gorges cut through the park, and in winter, frozen waterfalls stand like stone pillars. Sami traditions consider these hills sacred, places meant for respect rather than occupation. The atmosphere here is inward and contemplative. Farther west, Pallas Ellistountry National Park opens dramatically. Rounded fells roll across the horizon, offering wide, uninterrupted views beneath Arctic skies. Known for having some of the cleanest air in the world, the park feels expansive and breathable. Reindeer move freely across open ground, and auroras often ripple overhead, unchallenged by artificial light. Silence in Lapland is rarely complete. Wind moves through trees. Ice shifts beneath snow. Life continues quietly, even when unseen. Across Finnish Lapland, the forest slowly thins. The land rises and the horizon opens. Ahead lies Saariselka, where the Arctic begins to feel exposed. Saariselka lies in northern Finland, deep within Finnish Lapland, yet it feels distinctly different from the forest to the south. Here, the land rises gently into rounded hills known as fells. Shaped by glaciers thousands of years ago, trees grow shorter and more scattered, signaling a clear transition toward true Arctic conditions. Winter dominates life in Saariselka. Snow can blanket the ground for more than 7 months, and temperatures regularly drop below -30 degrees Celsius. During the darkest weeks of winter, daylight fades to a soft glow near the horizon, while long nights offer frequent views of the northern lights, dancing across the open sky. Despite the harsh climate, Saariselka remains a place of movement. Ski trails cross the fells. Snowshoes replace footsteps. Reindeer wander freely across roads and open ground, following seasonal grazing patterns that have existed for generations. For the Sami people, this landscape is part of a living system, shaped by migration, weather, and time rather than borders. In summer, the Arctic transforms. The midnight sun lingers through night, and the tundra briefly comes alive with wildflowers, insects, and birds. What appears barren in winter reveals surprising detail up close. Saariselka is not dramatic in the way of towering mountains or deep fjords. Its power lies in exposure. Here, the Arctic does not overwhelm. It quietly asserts itself, reminding that beyond the trees, a different world begins. As we move east, scale changes. Distances grow. Human presence spreads thinner across the land. Forests give way to industrial corridors and open tundra. The Arctic becomes heavier, shaped by extraction and endurance. This is the Russian Arctic. Murmansk stands above the Arctic Circle on the shores of the Barents Sea, one of the largest cities ever built this far north. At nearly 69 degrees latitude, it endures long winters and prolonged darkness, yet its harbor remains ice-free year-round. Warm Atlantic currents keep the port open even in midwinter, when temperatures often fall to minus 15 degrees Celsius, and winds drive the chill far lower. This single geographic advantage shaped Murmansk's history. Founded during the First World War, the city expanded rapidly through military strategy and industrial ambition. It became a key Arctic gateway, linking Russia to northern sea routes and global shipping. During polar night, the sun disappears for more than 40 days. Streetlights replace daylight. Life compresses inward. Apartment blocks glow against the dark, stacked high to conserve heat. Daily routines adjust, but do not stop. Murmansk reveals an Arctic shape not only by climate, but by geopolitics. Stretching east from Murmansk, the Kola Peninsula is a vast region of tundra, forest, and exposed bedrock. Rich mineral deposits made it one of the most industrialized Arctic regions during the 20th century. Mining complexes, smelters, and military installations at the landscape, leaving visible scars across the tundra. Pollution has altered soils, rivers, and vegetation, revealing the cost of large-scale Arctic industry. Yet this land is far from empty. Indigenous Sami communities continue to practice reindeer herding, fishing, and seasonal migration. Traditional knowledge persists despite increasing pressure from infrastructure and development. Winters are severe, with temperatures often falling below minus 20 degrees Celsius. Wind sweeps across open ground, erasing tracks and softening edges. The Kola Peninsula shows an Arctic that has absorbed human impact while still holding on to its deeper rhythms. Rising abruptly from the surrounding tundra, the Kibbeney Mountains feel unexpected in the Arctic landscape. Their rounded peaks were shaped long before glaciers sculpted the region. The mountains are rich in rare minerals, drawing miners into the interior Arctic in the early 20th century. Towns were built quickly, carved into valleys where winter conditions isolate them for months at a time. The Kibbeney Mountains are the largest mountain range on the Kola Peninsula and among the oldest on the planet. Snowstorms can shut down roads and rail lines without warning. Temperatures regularly drop below minus 30 degrees Celsius, and sound disappears into the frozen air. Despite the harshness, people remain. Life here requires careful planning, self-reliance, and respect for weather that cannot be negotiated with. The Kibbeney Mountains stand as silent witnesses to both geological time and human persistence. Farther east, the land narrows. Yamal means the end of the land in the Nenets language. The Yamal Peninsula stretches north into the Arctic Ocean, dominated by permafrost and open tundra. Winters are extreme, with temperatures often falling below minus 30 degrees Celsius and winds sweeping uninterrupted across the land. For centuries, the Nenets people have migrated across Yamal with their reindeer, following seasonal grazing routes. They live in portable tents called chums, moving hundreds of kilometers each year in rhythm with the land. In recent decades, Yamal has become one of the world's most important natural gas regions. Pipelines, drilling sites, and industrial roads now intersect traditional migration paths. The Arctic here is negotiated daily between ancient knowledge and modern industry. From the eastern edge of the high Arctic, we turn west. Across the Arctic Ocean, the ice continues unbroken, stretching over thousands of kilometers. Ahead lies Alaska, where the Arctic meets a continent, and wilderness finds its widest expression. Located entirely above the Arctic Circle, Gates of the Arctic National Park protects more than 8 million acres of untouched wilderness in northern Alaska. There are no marked paths here. Entry requires careful planning, bush planes, or long-distance river travel. The park takes its name from two peaks in the Brooks Range, once described as gates to the Arctic interior by explorer Bob Marshall. Snow-capped mountains, wide valleys, and braided rivers dominate the landscape. Winter temperatures regularly drop below minus 40 degrees Celsius. In summer, the midnight sun fuels rapid plant growth and insect life, transforming the tundra into a brief season of abundance. Caribou herds pass through the park during annual migrations, following routes older than human settlement. Wolves, grizzly bears, and Dall sheep roam freely. For indigenous peoples, this land has long been traveled rather than owned. Seasonal movement, hunting, and deep knowledge of terrain define the relationship with place. Gates of the Arctic represents true wilderness, where the Arctic remains unaltered and uncompromising. Leaving the gates of the Arctic, the land begins to change. Ahead lies Kobuk Valley, where dunes rise in a place shaped by ice. And the wilderness tells a different story. Kobuk Valley National Park lies north of the Arctic Circle, shaped by the Kobuk River and ancient winds. Unlike the mountains of nearby regions, this landscape opens wide into rolling tundra and surprising expanses of sand. The Great Kobuk Sand Dunes stretch across the valley, formed by glacial outwash thousands of years ago. In summer, the dunes warm under continuous daylight, creating a rare Arctic contrast of sand and ice. Temperatures range from minus 40 degrees Celsius in winter to warm summer days under the midnight sun. The land shifts dramatically with the seasons. Caribou migrations pass directly through the valley, and archaeological sites show that humans have followed these routes for thousands of years. Today, the park remains roadless and largely inaccessible, preserving a quiet Arctic rarely seen. From Alaska's inland sands, we move east. The dunes of Kobuk Valley fall away, and the Arctic stretches outward once more. Ahead lies the northern Yukon, where tundra, rivers, and migration define the land. In the northern Yukon, permafrost dominates the ground. Parts of northern Yukon have remained frozen for tens of thousands of years, preserving ancient animal remains in the permafrost. Forest gives way gradually to tundra, and rivers become the primary routes of movement. In summer, they flow freely. In winter, they freeze into highways of ice. Winters are long and severe. Temperatures routinely fall below minus 30 degrees Celsius, and snow covers the ground for most of the year. The region is home to indigenous communities who have adapted to Arctic conditions for generations. Traditional knowledge of weather, migration patterns, and land navigation remains central to survival. Caribou herds move across this landscape in vast numbers, shaping ecosystems and cultural practices. Their migrations dictate seasonal rhythms far more reliably than calendars. Northern Yukon's Arctic is quiet, open, and patient. It is a place where survival depends on reading the land carefully. From open tundra, paths begin to form, rivers converge. Ahead lies Inuvik, where the Arctic becomes lived in. Inuvik sits above the Arctic Circle near the Mackenzie River Delta. It was one of the first towns ever built specifically for life on permafrost. Buildings stand on pilings, allowing cold air to circulate beneath them and prevent the permafrost from melting. Roads buckle and shift as the ground moves, requiring constant maintenance. Inuvik experiences long, dark winters with temperatures dropping below minus 30 degrees Celsius. During summer, the midnight sun brings continuous daylight, fueling a brief but intense season of activity. The town is culturally diverse, home to Inuvialuit, Gwich'in, and other indigenous peoples. Traditions, languages, and food systems remain active and visible. Inuvik shows how Arctic towns are engineered as much as they are inhabited. Farther north, Tuktoyaktuk meets the Arctic Ocean. For generations, ice roads connected it to the south during winter. As the climate warms, these seasonal lifelines grow shorter and less reliable. Located on the Beaufort Sea, Tuktoyaktuk sits at the edge of the continent. The land here is flat and fragile, dominated by ice-rich permafrost. Winter temperatures frequently drop below minus 30 degrees Celsius, and strong coastal winds increase the chill. Sea ice once formed reliably each year, supporting travel and hunting. In recent decades, warming temperatures have shortened the ice season. Coastal erosion now threatens buildings and roads, reshaping the shoreline itself. For the Inuvialuit people, the ocean remains central to life. Fishing, hunting, and traditional knowledge continue to guide daily routines. Tuktoyaktuk stands at the front line of Arctic change. From the Arctic coast, we move south and east. The land grows firmer beneath the cold. Ice begins to gather again, this time along the edge of Hudson Bay. Ahead lies Churchill, where land, sea, and wildlife converge. Here lies the polar bear capital of the world. Situated on the western shore of Hudson Bay, Churchill lies just south of the Arctic Circle, but experiences full Arctic conditions. Winters are long, cold, and windy. Each autumn, polar bears gather near town, waiting for sea ice to form so they can return to hunting seals. The bear's presence draws global attention. Residents live alongside wildlife with caution and respect. Special patrols monitor bear activity to keep both people and animals safe. Churchill also hosts beluga whales in summer and northern lights in winter, making it one of the most biologically diverse Arctic destinations. Here, the Arctic feels close, immediate, and alive. Leaving the shores of Hudson Bay, the Arctic rises once more. Low land gives way to stone and ice. Across cold water, the landscape grows steeper, older. Ahead lies Baffin Island, where the Arctic regains its vertical scale. This is the largest island in Canada, and one of the most mountainous regions in the Arctic. Baffin Island rises sharply from the Arctic Ocean, with jagged peaks, deep fjords, and massive glaciers dominating the landscape. It feels vast and overwhelming in scale. Winter temperatures can plunge below minus 40 degrees Celsius. Storms isolate communities for weeks at a time, making self-reliance essential. Inuit communities live along the coast, maintaining strong connections to sea ice, hunting grounds, and seasonal travel routes. Knowledge of ice conditions is critical for safety and survival. The land here feels ancient and powerful, shaped by ice and time rather than human presence. Baffin Island represents the Arctic at its most imposing. From Baffin's cliffs, we look east. The Arctic narrows across open water. Ice bridges the distance. The sea carries history. Ahead lies Greenland, where the Arctic becomes vast again. Greenland occupies the emotional and physical core of the Arctic. More than 80% of the island is buried beneath ice, forming the second largest ice sheet on Earth. What remains exposed exists along narrow coastal edges. Along this rugged coast, a settlement comes into view. Low buildings cling to rock and water. This is Nuuk, Greenland's capital, one of the smallest capital cities in the world. Yet it is home to nearly 1/3 of Greenland's entire population. Nuuk sits on a rugged stretch of Greenland's southwest coast, facing the Labrador Sea. From a distance, it appears modest. Low-rise buildings painted in bright colors cling to rock and shoreline, arranged against a backdrop of dark mountains and drifting ice. But as Greenland's capital, Nuuk carries a weight far greater than its size. This is where modern Greenland takes shape. Government, education, culture, and trade converge in a place that still feels unmistakably Arctic. Winters are long and cold, with temperatures often dropping below minus 15 degrees Celsius. Sea ice drifts past the harbor, shaping shipping schedules and daily movement. Yet thanks to coastal currents, the port often remains accessible longer than settlements farther north. Inuit cultures thrived here long before Danish colonization began in the 18th century. Today, that layered history remains visible. Traditional hunting practices coexist with universities, cafes, and art spaces. Fishing boats share the water with research vessels and ferries linking remote communities. Leaving Nuuk, we turn inland. The coastline loosens its hold. The sea gives way to rock and open valley. Mountains retreat. Ahead lies Karlasjøsa, sits at the end of a long fjord on Greenland's western coast, near the Arctic Circle. Unlike most Greenlandic towns, it is not directly on the open ocean. This location exposes it to cold air draining off the inland ice sheet. City experiences some of the coldest winter temperatures in all of Greenland. Winters are severe. Temperatures frequently drop below minus 30 degrees Celsius, and the air is dry and still. Summer brings sudden warmth and clouds and mosquitoes, another Arctic extreme. But Karlasjøsa is more than just an airport. Geographically, it is the last gasp of rock and soil before the landscape gives way entirely. The air here is sharp, biting, and carries the invisible weight of what lies just 60 kilometers to the east, the second largest body of ice on the planet. A gravel road leads directly from settlement to ice, creating one of the most accessible gateways to Greenland's frozen interior. Here, the Arctic feels transitional. Civilization ends quickly, and ice begins almost immediately. The Greenland ice sheet holds enough ice to raise global sea levels by more than 7 meters if it melted completely, covering over 80% of Greenland. The ice sheet is a vast frozen plateau stretching thousands of kilometers. In places, it reaches thicknesses of more than 3 kilometers, burying mountains, valleys, and ancient landscapes beneath compressed snow. This ice stores climate history. Layers record snowfall going back hundreds of thousands of years, preserving evidence of past temperatures, volcanic eruptions, and atmospheric changes. Surface temperatures remain well below freezing most of the year. Winds sweep endlessly across the ice, sculpting snow into hard ridges and soft drifts. Movement here is slow and deliberate. Even experienced travelers must navigate crevasses hidden beneath thin snow bridges. The ice sheet is not static. It flows outward under its own weight, feeding glaciers that carry ice toward the sea. This frozen interior shapes not only Greenland, but the planet itself. The Greenland ice sheet's colossal outflow shapes the coastal terrain. Its massive outlet glaciers carve deep into the bedrock, creating spectacular, vast fjord systems. A prime example is the Kaiser Franz Josef Fjord on the eastern coast, a dramatic marine passage that directly showcases the ice sheet's erosive power. Kaiser Franz Josef Fjord is one of the longest fjord systems in the world, stretching deep into Greenland's interior. This immense fjord cuts through East Greenland's rugged mountains, channeling ice and water toward the Arctic Ocean. Sheer rock walls rise thousands of meters above the water, scarred by glaciers that once filled the valley entirely. Icebergs drift silently through the fjord, calved from distant glaciers. Sound is minimal here. Wind and the occasional crack of ice dominate the silence. Few people ever enter this region. No permanent settlements exist along its shores. Access is limited to expedition ships and research teams. The fjord reveals the scale of Arctic erosion, where ice has shaped stone over immense spans of time. While the Kaiser Franz Josef Fjord is a grand display on the east, the most active glacial calving zone is found on the west. This is the Ilulissat Ice Fjord, a UNESCO World Heritage Site known for producing some of the largest icebergs in the Northern Hemisphere. Located on Greenland's west coast, the Ilulissat Ice Fjord is fed by Sirmek-Kuyuthek, one of the fastest moving glaciers on Earth. Ice flows from the inland ice sheet toward the sea at astonishing speed. Massive icebergs break off daily, some towering higher than buildings. Their collapse produces deep, thunder-like sounds that echo across the fjord. The nearby town of Ilulissat lives beside this constant movement. Fishing boats navigate carefully among drifting ice, while residents witness glacial change as part of everyday life. The fjord is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognized for its scientific importance in understanding climate change and glacial dynamics. Here, the Arctic is not frozen in place. It is visibly alive. Moving north, the landscape transitions to the distinctive heart-shaped peak and steep, reddish rock of Murmansk Island, a key cultural and historic center further up Greenland's western coast. Named after the heart-shaped mountain that towers above the town, Murmansk Island lies far north, well above the Arctic Circle. Steep mountains rise sharply from the sea, with little flat land available for settlement. The town clings to the coastline, colorful houses pressed tightly together. Sea ice dominates much of the year, shaping travel, hunting, and daily routines. Winters are long and dark. Temperatures frequently fall below minus 20 degrees Celsius. Yet community life remains strong, centered on family, tradition, and shared resilience. Fishing and hunting continue to provide food and cultural continuity. Children grow up navigating boats, ice, and snow as naturally as streets. Murmansk reflects the Arctic at its most human, small, remote, and deeply connected to place. From mountains and tundra, the Arctic drifts back to sea. At the circle's edge, a small island briefly reappears. Grímsey, small enough to walk across, yet important enough to mark the boundary of an entire world. Here, the Arctic Circle touches land briefly. This is the only part of Iceland that lies directly on the Arctic Circle. Grímsey is a small, wind-swept island floating in the Arctic Ocean, about 40 kilometers off Iceland's northern coast. Fewer than 100 people live here, yet the island holds global geographic significance. The Arctic Circle cuts straight across it, slowly shifting over time due to Earth's changing tilt. Life on Grímsey is shaped by isolation. There are no trees and shelter is scarce. Strong winds dominate the landscape, shaping low buildings and determining when boats can safely dock. In winter, storms can cut the island off entirely for days. Bird life defines the island's identity. Grímsey hosts massive seabird colonies, including puffins, guillemots, and kittiwakes. Cliffs come alive in summer with sound and motion as birds nest and feed. Grímsey feels exposed and honest. The Arctic here is not dramatic ice or towering mountains, but wind, water, and endurance. The Arctic does not ask to be conquered or understood. It asks only one thing: that we listen